Live. Let's see. I know it's loading. Yeah, we're live.
There you go.
All right, let's see how long it takes. Can we see people's YouTube comments in here?
Yeah, we can on the comments section. I don't know if you guys can see it or not. I'm not really sure what your panel looks like, but I can see it on my end.
Cool. Oh, I can see live comments. There you go.
Well, Rig Jobs is commenting. Is that a live comment in our show? Do you see that from Oil Rig Jobs?
I see that.
No. So this actually came. I don't know what he commented on. I don't know if it was just he posted on our channel or something. But it's funny because look, I can throw this on here.
I mean, there's a lot of best practices missing.
Hey, look, we're noobs when it comes to YouTube. So
yeah, exactly. So what's happening, boys?
Just stuck at the quarantine, man. We did you guys binge watch the Tiger King?
We watched the first 2 episodes yesterday. I don't even know what to think. I'm on the edge of my seat.
The third episode when it gets good.
They're going to make that into a limited series.
Really?
Yeah, and there's Kate McKinnon from Saturday Night Live is going to play the woman who apparently murdered
Carol.
And they're sitting there saying who would be perfect playing Joe Exotic, and they were saying Matthew McConaughey would be or the guy who played from Eastbound and Down. What's his name? Eastbound and Down. Those are all solid deals there.
Well, so I went and watched that dude's YouTube, Joe Exotic's YouTube, and I think the most devastating news of 2020 is that we got robbed of his reality show, because it would have been probably the best reality show on TV.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I've never seen anything like it, and I'm sitting there, and I know I can say some extreme things, but I'm wondering if this is what's going to happen to me. In a year, I'm going to be like, if anyone comes to me, I'm getting a gun, grab my kids, and fucking killing everybody. It was something. It was something.
So I told Jake, I said, man, this guy would have killed it. He would have been so rich off of his show. And Jake's like, I don't know. He's threatening to kill people every time. I'm going to kill that Carol bitch.
Yeah, when you fly, when you rent a helicopter to go over, and then are thinking about throwing grenades. But I did think that Carol lady has a really good business model, right? 77 volunteers come to help the Tigers.
Yeah,
Joe just gives them leftover meat from Target. It's an interesting model. That's what USCMPs are going to start doing that with their employees. Leftover meat from Target.
It's not slave labor if you label it as volunteerism. So
I always felt exactly that. I remember going to Portland one time, and McMenamins. There's these great little hotels. And they grow their own vegetables, and they make their own beer, and they make their own distilleries. And everyone that works there is a volunteer from an Ivy League school. And I'm like, what the hell, man? How about down to drilling summer camp? That'd be fun.
I was laughing because of Tiger King. So I used to do a lot of work for Devin up in Oklahoma, in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I mean, this is 15 minutes from the zoo. And I had no idea that the zoo was up there, else I would have gone and seen it. But the least surprising thing to me was that the show took place up there, because if you haven't been to Ardmore, Oklahoma, I mean, it's full of characters. When I say characters, I mean meth heads. So
I don't, this might be offensive, but I'm going to say it anyway, because that's sort of what I do. But I was thinking every single person that I see in this Tiger King show is a voter in the United States and has an opinion on what we should be doing with coronavirus. And I feel like we should be giving an IQ test for people to weigh in with an opinion on whether the shutdown works. We should say, okay, question 1, do you understand how economics work? And number 2, do you understand that an exponential graph, if you graph the flu, it does the same thing. And if you can't get either of those questions, you have to go into the tiger cage to wrestle. That's what we do it.
So you want to mash the Tiger Zoo concept and the coronavirus.
100. And that black guy that is the face of the virus. He can be the guest commentator.
Well, I'm glad that they know that there's just another industry in which you get your arm torn off, and it's just another day at the office.
Right. Yeah, that girl is a baller. Hey, so this guy, I want to comment on Glenn Fiedler.
Yeah.
Because, like, if that's his real picture, that is a good looking guy. Like, Tiger King would go crazy for that guy. Right? Is that just me?
So what Glenn ask?
With $20 to $30 oil, should the U.S. be say we ban imports and set the price around 40? I mean, I can weigh in on that, Alan, or one of you guys. You want to go first?
Let you take it first, or whoever wants to get it.
I think that's a tough. I think that anytime you start playing around with those kind of things, you have consequences that are far worse after this is over. And this being over is gonna. We know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It might be a longer tunnel than we want, but you know, it's not a bad world coming out of this.
I mean, to me, I think it's twofold. I don't think the refineries are teed up to only process U.S. light sweet crude. So we need 7 million barrels a day of imports, regardless, of which a number of millions of those is from Canada. And I think Canada is in a similar situation oil field wise to the U.S. I wrote a white paper on this 2 weeks ago that started circulating in the federal government that proposes tariffs on imported barrels. And so, Alan, I agree with you. Government intervention is a problem. But I also think that, like, if we were in the gallows with the noose around our neck, it's not the drop that kills us, it's the sudden stop. Mm-hmm. And so realistically, even though companies have been reluctant to say it, we're going to get to zero capital, like zero drilling rigs, zero completion rigs, zero workover rigs, zero pumps run, zero wells brought back on. And that's the only way we can rebalance demand. And so to help generate revenue to offset some of the displaced workers and to help like smooth things out for 6 months, I'm in favor of a $35 a barrel tariff and shutting off all exports. That's how I would propose to fix it.
I don't know what you guys have seen here, but in the last 2 days, you know, most of my operator friends have gotten letters from nearly all, except for Shell, but I mean Plains, Dorado, all the crude purchasers saying effective March 1, all contracts are off. They're going out there and they've sent out mass mailings saying that you no longer have a contract after May 1st.
Yeah.
So it's I said and they're citing just that there is no storage capacity.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. I mean, even in the best case, I think the world has 845 million barrels possibly of excess storage in the full, if you could put it, places. And it's not all connected to the refineries. So, you know, the way I see it is fundamentally US E&Ps are demonstrating an absolute ridiculous lack of knowledge of economics. Like they should be on Tiger King. Because demand is down 20 million barrels a day in the world. It is. So guys keep saying, oh, I can't shut my wells in. Oh, I need my cash flow. Oh, my debt's going to default me. At $20, you're defaulted anyway. And there's physically nowhere to put it. So you are going to shut in. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you might as well be proactive and like show leadership. That's a piece I don't really get.
You know, it's going to be interesting. What's going to be interesting about it all is if you've ever operated an oil well. I mean, gas wells are easy. I mean, shut in a gas well and you get it back, right? You just turn in valves. Oil wells are always bitch. And it's going to be interesting to see what comes back after this big shut-in, because this will be the big shut-in.
Well, and you know, and it does feel a little bit like, think about the frac hits that everyone's been talking about for the last year. And now operators in Cube development have been shutting in all of their offset wells for 30 days while they're doing it. And so I think there's demonstrated evidence that a 30-day shutdown is probably not the worst. And then I think beyond that, brand new wells that are flowing, you can probably shut those in or at the very least choke them. And then, you know, people talk about leases. Well, I mean, so just pump the well once a week. You know what I mean? Like pump a well bore volume and then shut it in for 7 days, and then pump a well bore volume. Like there's lots of creative things that we can do. So Alan, I agree with you. There's some potential risk, but it's so easy to mitigate. I just think that US E&P management teams are like, ooh, we can't shut it in because if we shut it in, we'll lose our wells and blah, blah, blah. And they come up with all the reasons they can't, instead of like being like, well, we're going to try it because our company goes away if we don't.
Well, I mean, it's existential. So they've got to do it. It's just, but there's going to be it's not going to be I don't think it's going to be a minor loss. I think a lot of these companies are going to come back, that production's going to come back at 80% or, I mean, that's just been history of reservoir engineering to begin with since the beginning. Yeah. And I just, it's really sickening to watch.
Yeah.
So Killian said, didn't Russia say that they were interested in a new agreement today? We should probably pursue that before import bans. I haven't seen anything. Have you guys seen anything in the news about Russia wanting a new deal?
Yeah, there was something on Reuters today that sort of said that if they were willing to agree to a larger pact, whatever that means, and again, I mean, I've said this since March 7th, is that there is nowhere for them to put the oil. So Saudi was never going to produce more oil. They threatened it, and Russia couldn't.
Right.
Like, so it was basically what they did on March 7th was, we can snap our fingers and screw with all of your economics anytime we want to. Stop growing. But
that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
Right. They have not swamped the world with oil. They just said that they would.
And it's embarrassing, right? Because like all these other companies, United is cutting flights, and this is all before like the quarantine lockdown craziness that we're in, that I know we're going to talk about. But it's like all these companies are lowering guidance, and then US E&Ps are like, hey, we're growing next year 10 to 12%, guys. Doesn't that sound great? And you're like, how stupid are you? Like if they had just said no growth, I almost wonder if the Saudis would have played more ball. But it's like demand's down 3 million barrels a day. We're expecting OPEC to cut. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we're just going to grow, guys. Don't worry about us.
Well, don't you think that E&Ps aren't really incentivized on an individual basis to cut or restrict production? And this brings up a talking point that some people on Twitter have been talking about is, should oil and gas be nationalized in America? I mean, do you need cartels to set a price floor? What do you guys think?
I think that the industry has done a better job not incenting only production growth. And I like to believe, I mean, when you look at the proxies, Bloomberg did an article, I think Liam Denning's opinion piece yesterday, talked about the top 15 or something US E&Ps and what their bonuses were. And they were all getting like 100 to 150 or 200% payouts based on last year's performance. Yeah. I mean, to me, production growth, safety, it's all bullshit. They're going to give the guy whatever bonus they want, and that this is an executive compensation issue across the world. They're not incented to grow production if they understand supply demand. I think that they're just too lazy to do it.
I would say that the fastest road to $200 a barrel of oil is to nationalize oil and gas, because national oil companies suck at finding oil and gas.
Yeah.
We're dealing with, kind of 3%. I mean, 20%, the 20%, the 20 million barrels from a immediate basis, absolutely. Our guys say that is, we're looking at it. We're, reasonable demand destruction on that, at least on a day-by-day basis. But it's, at the end of the day, when we get through the other side of this virus deal, I mean, China's they're at 02 output now. That's what they were beforehand. So they're back to work. South Korea's back to work. UK just downgraded what they figured to be the threat is because they figured out the denominator issue. Right. And so there's certain countries that are just getting back to work. And so the 20 million's not there for a long time. And fundamentally, we have these strong markets outside of oil and gas for sure that need oil and gas, and frankly, this kind of cost right now is in the long term going to be very we were facing demand destruction anyhow. So this is throwing in a whole lot of different things into the whole equation for people saying, shit, what am I going to do all this, with, notice what happened right over here. Wind and solar went to Congress asking for, begging for more and more subsidies because they couldn't survive. They couldn't survive coronavirus. What kind of bullshit is that? I mean, this is, the whole piece is tied together. Anas al-Haji, to me, is probably the smartest guy with regards to really knowing what's going on in Saudi Arabia, and he talked about this very multivariant equation that they thought out and have the ability to kind of weather better than most. But it was all about causing Putin to come back with his hat in hand.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That actually kind of leads us talking about subsidies and bailouts. Someone asked us in the questions, do you think the 2.2 trillion bill is going to devalue the US dollar to the point of no return? Or do you think it's really going to help everyone like they say?
I mean, I'm as scared as I've been since 2008. And I know, Alan, you'd remember 2008. I remember there was a day when the Dow dropped 777 points, which at the time was a big number. Now it does that like in 3 minutes. But I mean, I was pretty convinced the world economy was ending, and quite frankly, it almost did. And I'm more scared now about this $2.2 trillion stimulus package than I was about 2008. And yeah, I'm really worried about inflation because you can't just print your way out of it. But I think for all the people who are in favor of the lockdown, and I am very much anti the lockdown. I am like, let the virus run its course. But it's because if Cheesecake Factory, who today said they're not going to pay rent, the landlord who owns the building is now not going to pay their taxes. The taxes and the utilities are now not going to get paid. And the taxes pay for teachers and police and fire department who now have to get laid off. So then you lay those people off. Those people have kids in school. Those schools close. They move out of the city. Your workforce drains. I mean, if we've all been to dead towns in America that were like mining towns or oil towns 40 years ago, and now it's all boarded up and it's the most depressing place in the world. If we don't get back to work like President Trump says on April 12th, I think it's done. I think the entire society is. Yeah,
the real stress test is in 4 days. Rent's due.
Yeah.
And, well, I'll tell you some interesting. So there's a question here about Dominion Ronstadt, which I agree with. In a normal economics, and this has been the case now for a decade. In normal economics, you don't go out there and triple and quadruple your money supply ever. Well, we do that all the time. And we don't have an impact. We have normal inflation, 2% or 3% inflation. And the reason is because there's nothing else. There really literally is nothing else. And the world is hoping on this right over here because the alternative is a collapse. Yeah, that whole global currency thing has been magic for the United States. There's no wonder why China or Russia or anybody else would rather be the exchange currency, right? Yeah. Because of the magic that it has provided to us. So I don't know where the elastic limits are on that, because once you are that global exchange currency, the elastic limits are unbelievable.
Yeah, they asked if it devalued the dollar. I mean, it's pretty easy. Open up your wallet, look at your dollars, and now there's 2.2 billion more dollars on the market.
Yeah,
I think the money in your wallet's devalued. Let's see here from Glenn asking about crypto, gold, real estate.
I'm worried about real estate, Colin. I mean,
I'm worried about every single asset class. I mean, You can ask anyone. I'm a huge bull in Bitcoin, love cryptocurrency, but we've seen that it's not decoupled from the market. It's correlated right now. So where do you go for shelter? I mean, it's not crypto, it's not real estate. I mean, gold has been up and down. So where do you go?
You go to those, what is that insurance? Those life insurance policies.
Well, I mean, and I think that's what
I think it might actually be a driver, kind of good market for that right now.
I mean, I think I really hope I really hope that we have transitioned the conversation over the last week to this is about saving lives, to people have actually said like, okay, when does this end? Because I think we can all agree we can't stay in lockdown for 5 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can we maybe stay in lockdown for a month? Maybe. Okay. I think we've already been in lockdown for 2 weeks, but let's just go with that. When we restart, there will be people from Kenya or people from Belarus or people who aren't locked down who are going to get on a plane and they're going to fly and we're going to get sick. And then the whole thing is going to start again until it goes all the way through society. And I know that people don't like me to say this, but if you scale the Diamond Princess fatality rate, it's less than 1%. And if you scale it for age, it's as low as 0.1%. And if 1 million people die of this in the US, 2.7 million are already going to die this year anyway. And so how many is the overlap? And is 1 million people's lives worth the destruction of everything, the entire fabric of society for the other 349 million people that live here and the other 7.7 billion people on Earth? I just don't think so. And politicians have not done that math because they're too afraid to say it because people are going to say, ooh, you're killing my grandma.
No, they're not only are they not afraid to say it, they're afraid to say it. This is an election year. The bigger the disaster and the more dependent we are on the government, the better the government likes it. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, you look at the virus, and if you look at the curve, I mean, I saw somewhere today, I don't know if this is factually accurate, that it's doubling every 3 days. I mean, it's growing, right? And it's only going to continue to grow the more that we test for it. But what do you do? Because obviously our economy can't shut down for 2 weeks. We've already shown that it can't shut down for 2 weeks. I have lots of servers that can't pay their bills. You know, they can't afford to eat or pay rent.
Yeah.
I think Dave's exactly right. I mean, I think this has been around for a while. And the reality is that I think that we have 10 million people that are infected right now. I don't know what's been going on for the last 2 weeks. I have a lot of friends that have gotten sick in the last month and finally results back saying, yeah, they have it. But they got through it and they went through it all. They all thought they had the flu. They all thought they had a cold. And they were all doing stuff together. I mean, this is prevalent. This is not that number you see of 80,000 or 81,000 Americans having it.
I know a lot of people who've been told don't even come in and test.
Yeah, I got tested for it last week. It was supposed to take 24 hours to get back, and they're saying it's actually about 10 days because the labs are so on for it.
And for whatever reason, society is not using a closed sample. So let's use the Princess Diamond ship. There was 3,700 passengers on a cruise ship, which is a petri dish. Like, I mean, and if it wasn't STDs that were being exchanged by these old people, it was going to be coronavirus. So let's just say there's a lot of kissing and making out and a lot of transmission of a lot of things. And out of 3,700 people, 700 ended up infected and 7 people died. Let's use the NBA as a closed sample. 14 NBA players have the coronavirus out of 450, which if you translate that into the US, 10 million people already have it. 2 members of Congress out of 435 have it that we know of. That translates to 1.5 million people already have it. And we only have 1,400 deaths. Like, this is not a big deal. We're shutting down the world and the economy, and we're putting so many people more at risk by shutting down paychecks and shutting down mortgages, and Cheesecake isn't going to pay their rent, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, people need to wake the fuck up. And when hotel rooms cost double and airlines cost double or triple when they restart, if people complain to me and they supported the lockout, I'm gonna UFC them, Colin. I'm gonna use your skills.
I don't want to live in a world with Cheesecake Factory. I love Cheesecake Factory.
I love Cheesecake Factory.
Hey, we got a comment. We got a comment from Andy, brought to you by Chili's. It's classic. Jake, why don't we roll to our sponsor real quick?
Oh yeah, let's roll to our sponsor really quickly.
Yeah.
Here's a message from our sponsor.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back. Chili's. I want baby back ribs. Chili's baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
Chili's baby back ribs. Chili's baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
Thanks, Chili, for sponsoring this live stream.
Love
Shout out
it.
to the Chili's Triple Dipper. All right. Let's see, Glenn. You want to put Glenn's comment up, Jake? This is on the coronavirus. He said he disagrees. That takes time.
Well, I guess the question is how long has it been there? And if everyone's locked down, like California still only has 3,000 cases. They clearly have higher testing capability. As of yesterday, they tested 435,000 Americans and they had 80,000 who were sick. So I wonder, what were the other 350,000 people sick from that they were so sick that they were getting a test? I would propose that they were sick from the flu or anything. But like as a relative number, we're so focused on this number. There's 16 to 23 million hospitalizations for the flu, like hospital visits for the flu every year. We've only tested 435,000 for this. I just don't buy the numbers. I think it's easy to project to the sky, but if you water a tree, it's not going to reach the sky. It just isn't.
Yeah. Craig had brought up a good point in the comments saying to keep a close eye on the suicide rate over the next month. I mean, that's something serious, especially, in the oil and gas industry. I already saw a story on LinkedIn the other day about a guy trying to commit suicide and someone talking him out of it because he lost his job. So, there's real consequences, economic impact.
One of the big things is it's just crazy to think about. But Tillman Fertitta, obviously, he owns the Landry's, kind of conglomerate, and I mean they had to essentially furlough like 44,000 people. And a lot of people that I've seen on Facebook have been demonizing him, saying, "Oh, what a shitbag! He's a billionaire, this and that." And I'm like, what do you expect him to do?
Mm-hmm.
Either you take, 2 weeks off, a month off, 2 months, however long, and you can probably come back to your job, or you don't, and there's no business to come back to. And now 44,000 people have to go find entirely new jobs.
Yeah.
And that's just one business. Then you look at, all the other restaurant chains, all the other airlines, all the other hotels, anybody else who runs a business that depends on people being there in person.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I just watched these kind of actions, and the city of Austin passed a resolution yesterday giving everyone who's renting either a business or a house, a home, the ability to defer their rent for April, May, and June, or March, April, May. So, and I was sitting there thinking, what a terrible thing to go do, because you didn't get rid of that rent. Now those people are going to come back 3 months from now.
Yeah.
and be faced with 3 months rent, instead of going out and doing the right thing, which is right now the banks are really helping people that own, real estate to go out there and redo their loans and lower the interest rates on loans for right now, because everybody's in it together, right? And I own some commercial real estate with a buddy of mine, and we just went out there. We took as much cash as we could, and then we went to every tenant and said, we'll go out there and give you rent abatement if you want to, rent abatement for the next 3 months, and we'll amortize it over the remaining part of your lease. And if it's too low, if it's too short, then we can extend out your leases to go do those things. But instead, we go out and do these ham-handed things people are going to look at as gifts, and then going to be you talk about creating a real crisis 3 months down the road.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad when everybody's being faced with how to come up with 3 months worth of rent when they can hardly come up with one.
Yeah, Alan, Roland Reyes in the comments brought up a good question talking about interest rates. He said with the incoming pseudo universal basic income and almost zero interest rates, do you think the Fed will need to drop to negative interest rates in this market downturn?
I mean, negative interest rates aren't really a thing. And it's not like we can lower interest rates and solve it. And I know Glenn, just above that, had commented on the demand for ventilators. I mean, I just think it's such a red herring. A, the Fed cutting interest rates doesn't help ventilators. And B, if you're on a ventilator, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to die anyway. So if you're on a ventilator, you're in a really, really bad place. And it appears that 1% of people who get this disease or this virus, it appears, go on a ventilator if you have pre-existing conditions. So to me, no, the Fed can't go to negative interest rates. It just doesn't, it's not going to solve the core problem. If we don't go back to work, society breaks.
Well, this is what concerned me most is that we're having a historic bull run and that the Fed continued to drop interest rates. I mean, that's a lever that they pull, when the market's dropping to stimulate the economy. And it's like, once you bottom out, what do? We're going to be like Germany and have negative interest rates. I mean, it doesn't make economic sense. So
if we pivoted to energy, and I would say this about every business in America right now, every business, including Apple, Microsoft, Nike, but United Airlines, Hilton Hotels, like Bill Ackman said, and every US E&P is currently worth zero equity, and all the debt holders are going to have to take a loss because there is no business occurring.
Mm-hmm.
So,
negative interest rate would really be good for them.
yeah, it'll cause mass inflation in Germany in 1923. If we want to create hyperinflation, that's how we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, put up this question from Mark. It got pushed back a little bit, but wanted to know what characteristics that we'll see in the surviving oil and gas companies. Is there a heavy tech influence? I don't know if you guys saw this back a couple of years ago. I posted this video on LinkedIn that went viral, and I was talking about these E&Ps had to start adopting new digital technology or else they were going to die. And I thought that was a good message back in the day, but now, you can adopt all the technology that you want, but there's a core problem in the capital structure of E&Ps, right? And they have to go through this massive restructuring. So what do you guys see as the surviving companies in 5-10 years? I mean, are these going to be ultra lean, technology focused E&Ps, or will it be business as usual?
It's certainly not going to be business as usual. I do think, just like, E&P was very slow to adopt technology, and it always went out and hired its way into booms and laid itself off through the busts. That's not. I mean, I guess the big guys are going to get leaner, but they're going to still always have a lot of people. But I think that independents it's going to be much more gig-like economies. The independents are going to have fewer people to go do this work. The amount of oil produced per person is going to be very low, and because that translates that human effort translates so is multiplied so much by tech across the board, and I definitely see a much bigger implication on that. And I also think that just in general, we'll never be able to get these companies will never. Well, I'm not going to say never, because never is a terrible word with bankers, I guess. But why in the world would anybody borrow the amount of money that they did in order to go do this again? It had to have been based on there was no beta risk on the price of oil and gas, and clearly there's massive beta risk, and so that's gonna stay in there. Scott Anderson, an old friend of mine in Houston, his dad was an old wildcatter in Houston, and he had a great saying. He said, the oil man's worst enemy is a friendly banker. And that's just once again proven to be true.
I love what you said about the gig economy. It's something that I've talked about for a while. We've seen it in Silicon Valley, and I always look for things that Silicon Valley has done right and things that we can apply to our industry. Is, typically we are lagging behind by 10, 20 years, depending on who you talk to. And I think we definitely are going to see a lot more of that. I think you're going to see more people to where, I was having a talk with a buddy of mine who runs an E&P here in Houston. He laid off most of their staff in the office. They had 40 people in the office. Now they're down to 8. They've taken massive pay cuts themselves. And I was talking to him, and I was like, yeah, man, you just got to do whatever you can do to survive. But I was like, man, I talked with a couple of the different universities who've got petroleum engineering programs and geology programs, and they already have declining registration. And so how as an industry do we keep attracting the best young talent whenever people who are in their industry, you know, if they were to ask somebody, hey, you know, what's it like? And they've already been to 2-3 downturns in the last 10, 15 years. How do we continuously try to attract that talent? And how do we make it, you know, a attractive industry for people to come into? You know, and I think the gig economy plays a big part in that, to where now if you're a freelancer, you know, you can work for 3, 5, 10 companies at a time, in the same way that video editors and audio editors and graphic designers and those guys work online. You know, we hire a lot of those kind of people, and sometimes they stay around for a long time, sometimes they don't. But regardless, we know that there's an endless supply of people who can do quality work. Yeah. You know, and I think if I was, you know, an engineer, which I'm not, I mean, I would want to work for multiple companies at a time so that I know that I'm not going to be laid off. If I'm an employer, I would probably want to build a staff of freelancers, honestly.
Well, I mean, I think there's two things that kind of get masked by the coronavirus. Number one, we were in a secular decline. Everyone says, oh, I've been through 5 busts before. But, you know, if you really go macro back to 1985, the U.S. had declined from 1985 and before that to 2008. And we'd gone from 8 million barrels a day or whatever to 5 million barrels a day. And when I graduated in 2000, there were virtually no jobs, and it wasn't an attractive industry to go into. And like, you would never tell your kids to go into coal. And the reality is US and Canada produce $50 to $60 barrels at best. So all these Twitter guys that keep saying, oh, go conventional, go conventional. The conventional business was bled out from 1973 till 2008. When oil goes back to 70, maybe there's a conventional play. But shale was the only oil that worked between 50 and 60. And now that Russia has shown that they're willing to flex their muscles and Saudi is willing to flex their muscles, we become the marginal barrel. And you should never go into an industry where you are the marginal producer. You know, when I was on Bloomberg in November, I said, the only company you should want to own is Saudi Aramco. The problem is the valuation. It should have a 7% yield. And they instead came out with 4.5% because their government said, oh, we want to increase production, screw oil prices. As an investor, you can't invest in that. But Saudi Aramco is the one who will turn the lights out. The U.S. producer's dead at this point.
People have short memories. I graduated high school in 2008, and I couldn't get a job in the oil field. I lived in Midland and couldn't get a job. I mean, it was rough then. Yeah. And it wasn't until shale started picking up that, you know, there were jobs available. That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with the whole concept that Saudi Arabia is the only source of oil in the future and that U.S. is dead. I think that U.S. production, and if you can just get rid of the stupid, insane amount of money that people paid for non-producing acreage and all the other things that are just there that have to be dealt with, the asset base is pretty phenomenal. It does scare Saudi Arabia, and it does scare Russia, specifically Russia, because we were exporting LNG and crude oil into Europe, which Russia geopolitically does not want to have happen. Yeah. What's happening here? This is not an attack. It is an attack on shale producers, but what it's really an attack on is the transportation infrastructure that's not built out. You know, the full natural gas infrastructure, the crude oil pipeline infrastructure to the coasts so that it's exportable is kind of scheduled to take place it's supposed to be ending in 2023, where there's plenty of kind of overlap and everything like that. This was meant to basically retard any of that, because what they don't want to have happen is U.S. crude oil getting into the export arena, or minimize that exportability. Yeah. And the reality is that the problem is that Saudi Arabia actually it is the only source of hard currency, as it is in Russia, you know, virtually the only source. And so they have uses for all that. And so I have to say that if you ask a politician what's more important, the cost of keeping people from hanging you in the town square, or the marginal operating cost, they're really concerned about that not getting hung in the town square cost.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, one question I've always asked is, obviously the point of OPEC is to have production stability and to hold the price floor, but what's kept them from getting into a price war with Americans? And that's why I've really been thinking over the last couple of months about, hey, do we need cartels in oil to, kind of group everyone together? Because right now the way that America works is we got, 500 fucking E&Ps and no one's on the same page. No one's on the same page. So it'll just be interesting to see how it shakes out. I just think that when you look at demand curves and you look at supply curves, supply is gonna be fulfilled by the lowest marginal cost operator, and that's not America. So,
on that point, there's an even larger issue right now that U.S. producers, I agree with you, Colin. 500 people trying to do their own best interest and think about their own lenders and stuff is a problem. But here's the issue: 20 million barrels a day in the world of oversupply times 30 days is 600 million barrels. And that's not being consumed. It's being stored somewhere. The person who controls the storage is going to buy those barrels at $20 a barrel. And when oil goes to $24 a barrel, they will make a 20% profit. That's not the government's making that money. It's not royalty owners. It's not landowners, and it's not E&Ps. And they can trickle out 2 million barrels a day of oversupply for the next 300 days. For every 1 month we continue to overproduce, they can oversupply the market by 2 million barrels a day for 300 days, which will depress oil into the 30s for as long as it needs to for them to sell. And so unless the US producers shut in half their production today, they are guaranteeing that oil will be in the low 30s for the next 2 years.
So you're, in effect, it's a pretty interesting concept. You're selling bullets to the guy with a gun to your head.
Correct. And they're going to keep pulling you can't make any more bullets because they have all the bullets. They have 600 bullets they have to get rid of before you. And you need $40 to $50 oil. You need $40 to $50 oil. And you are selling it to these guys at 20. So as soon as it goes to 30, they're like, here you go. Yeah, I got some. No, hold on. I got some in my bathtub. 1 second. Oh, here we go. And oil stays at 30. And then all of the US E&Ps, and I'm talking Exxon. Exxon is a zero right now. So our most powerful company in the world previously can't go and get a deal somewhere because their market cap is going to fall below $50 billion if we head down this path. Tesla is going to be bigger than Exxon in 6 months.
Yeah, that's wild. That also brings up another good point. We don't have to talk about it much, but a lot of people, especially at the field level, a lot of people think that the majors are going to come in and save the day, and it's just not the case. We made a YouTube video on this other day talking about it, that when you break down wells drilled in 2018, the majors accounted for 5% of shale wells. I mean, they're not active in this space, right? So I don't think people realize that the majority of horizontal wells have been drilled by private companies and small public caps. So
yeah. And honestly, Colin, I mean, think about it. And Alan, you touched on it earlier. To me, the world changed March 7th. And there was a guy on Twitter. I appreciate him a lot. I'm not on Twitter anymore, obviously, but I think it's Energy Cynic. And we were emailing, and it was before Saudi made the announcement. And I was getting ready to sell out of all my energy positions, to be honest, because with Russia saying and driving oil to 45, it looked really bad. And then an hour after he and I were texting, or she and I were texting, Saudi did what they did. And to me, it permanently changes the risk premium for investing in oil in the United States forever. So I think the oil business in the United States is now dead as a result. I think that it's the most bullish thing that ever could have happened to gas. And Alan knows this from when we were at the Energy Ship Summit in Scottsdale a couple weeks ago. I said there's no bull case for gas, zero. But now that Saudi and Russia have told oil producers they will not accept any more barrels, and the U.S. will decline to 9 million barrels a day, that's 15 BCF of associated gas that immediately comes off the market in the next year. Now the natural gas world is balanced, and we've just witnessed a geopolitical process that wrecked our economy. You don't think Americans are going to be more keen to go use electric vehicles now than oil? So natural gas is now going to get a second coming because people are going to be anti-OPEC, anti-Russia, anti-Saudi, anti-oil, and the natural gas producers are the benefit. So if you're a natural gas player, the best thing that ever could have happened to you was what happened March 7th.
That's an interesting theory. We have a couple of questions here. Let's run through some of these quick before we end this stream. Jake, you want to put up that one that you had on the refineries?
Yeah, really quickly, let's tackle this. This is something, I was talking to our buddy over at the DOE, and this is something that I kind of thought of. Is it compared to a $2 trillion stimulus bill, in the event, obviously they're talking about bailouts. I don't think bailouts is the option, but in the event that the government was to fund any kind of retrofitting of refineries, it's cost, I think, a few billion per refinery to actually retrofit these to refine more of our own domestic crude to get to what President Trump calls energy dominant, energy independent, like truly being independent. What do you guys think? Is that a good idea? Is that a terrible idea? And why or why not?
It's just not going to happen. I mean, you're going to either build a new refinery that, frankly, U.S. crude is built for just teapot type refining. It's not complex refining because it's just high end. It's 50 plus, API gravity crude. The ones that we have today are based off of being able to take a mix, right? Everything from 5 and 10 gravity crude up to 50, an average of 30 gravity crude. And as a refiner has described it to me, what's interesting is if you take a mix of 10 gravity and 50 gravity and blend it to make 30 gravity as an input, or you have equal distributions of 5 through 50 gravity crudes through there, the difference, the difference in the margins that you have on the first barrel has 0 margin. The second barrel has $15 margin. And that's because you're not actually having to refine. You're just going and cracking. You're not having to crack anything. You're just going out there and distilling it. And that's really what's going on over here. And it's really just hard to go take 50 plus gravity crude and distill all the petrochemical needs that you need out of that whole deal alone. The rest of the world is set up to go take our 50 gravity crude much easier than we do right over here because we have such we create our margins out of making these whole suite of petrochemicals out of these things.
I mean, to me on that question, maybe it could have been a good idea 5 years ago. I think the right answer short term is tariffs on all imported barrels. We import about 7 million, 2 million, I think, from Canada. So let's call it 5 million is sort of Middle Eastern, Russian, global barrels. So $25 a barrel or $35 a barrel to stabilize the market and to generate revenue to help pay all of the displaced oil field workers that will occur while the economy recovers and then people transition. So Jordan had asked, and I'm going to get to the refinery, but Jordan has asked, what do we bottom at in rigs? I think we're going to bottom at less than 200 rigs and less than 100 frac spreads, which is a drop of 75% rigs from today and a drop of 66 fracs. And I would not be surprised to see it go way, way lower.
Next week?
Not by next week, but by, let's call it August 1st.
I'll say
we're going to see another 80. I think we see another 80 rigs drop next week. There were 44 today.
Yeah.
I know EOG is going from 19 to 4. I know Chevron's going from 18 to 4. I know Hess is going from 6 to 1. Like it's going away. So on the refinery, I think the other thing is if we go back to when you and I first met like a year ago, and when I started talking about peak U.S. oil, if you look at the November to December EIA 914 report, the U.S. actually declined. And we're going to decline again in January, and we're going to decline again in February. And that's before the coronavirus impacted anything. The U.S. was already on decline because we were drilling wells too close in all the basins. So the U.S. was only going to hit 12.8 and decline. So to me, to revamp all the refineries to go manage crude, since we are now going to decline to 9 million barrels a day and we'll go down from there since you won't be able to attract capital, it doesn't make sense to fix the refineries, but it does make sense to put tariffs to raise the cost of processing gas here, change consumption, and then help oil field workers find new jobs.
Hey,
well,
Alan,
I think given the fact that we do pay a severance tax here, which is a carbon tax. make no mistake about it. No other product has to pay that tax. So it's a carbon tax. So we pay severance tax, and every barrel that we do import pays a 10-cent, or used to pay a 10-cent fee, but it doesn't come close to paying, 6 or 7% of the total with regards to the severance taxes that we impose on our own production.
Yeah.
The other thing to really be concerned about here is in all these places is the ad valorem taxes, because those are usually county assessed, and if they assess that mineral interest at $40 or $50 or $60 a barrel, well, then that'll murder everybody.
Yeah. It's ugly.
Alan, what's your guess for rig count next week?
Oh, I have to say I agree with David. I think that it's everybody's just pulling back, massively right now. There's no reason, unless you have a contractual reason to be there. You're being forced to go do this. Why in the world?
I'm gonna go on the aggressive side. I'll say rig count drop to 450 by next weekend.
It's actually not a bad call, Colin. Honestly, I mean, at this point, $20, nobody is making a single dollar, regardless of hedges, on any investment they're making. So therefore, if you could not do anything, like if you could get to casing point and then just call your landowner and said, we need a 6-month reprieve or whatever, I bet everyone is doing it. There's no reason to be running a single piece of oil and gas equipment in the country until next year.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, let's take this one last question from Glenn Fielder. It's at 6:38. Jake, if you want to throw it up. He asks, do you think that Rig Up, which if you guys don't know what Rig Up is, Rig Up's a gig economy platform, expands into knowledge workers and more skilled labor because of this?
I think a guy like Rig Up or a guy like Inveris with Alan's company or previous company, depending on what role you're playing today. But I know you're actively involved in founding it and what you did. Those companies don't have any assets that are oil and gas related, and so they can transcend previous business models. And so Rig Up for sure can transcend the business model, and Inveris can for sure transition the business model. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see those guys do a very different asset light business that other people can't do. And that's going to change the way that people consume assets in this US, in the country.
Rig Up went through a round of layoffs this last week, and you look at some of these tech startups in oil and gas, and I mean, they have a direct correlation with rig count. I mean, Rig Up has a direct correlation with rig count when you're providing a platform for contractors, for drilling supervisors and completions consultants. I mean, heavily dependent on the rig count. So, I don't think they really have any option but to pivot into different skill sets.
100%.
They definitely have the capability. And there's a lot of movement in that whole realm right over here. So I can't speak any more definitively than that. But I definitely see a world in which virtual management of all these things is the place, and it's not there yet. I mean, it's not going to go. You're not going to go out there and turn it all over to any of these groups right now, but in the next 6 months to 12 months, there's going to emerge different business models than we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And it's going to be about how do you maintain and how do you continue to conserve value number one, and then build value number two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think we'll end it on that note. I think we got through our first live, pretty
we actually had no technical difficulties. I actually thought this was going to be much harder than it was, but huge thanks to both of you guys for just taking the time on a Friday night to just sit here and chat with everybody. So
I want to give a hopefully a couple people in the comments too. Glenn, Dominion, Killian, all you guys asking some good questions. Appreciate the engagement and supporting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for us. Love what you guys continue to do for the Face of Energy. That was an incredible video of destruction, Colin. I think that was you that made it. That thing, even that thing's making circulations from friends who wouldn't have otherwise known, and they're like circulating it.
It's reported to me 4 times so far. So.
It was pretty incredible.
I think we're gonna do like a 30 base video showing like the background of making that, because I was in my bed about to go to sleep drinking a glass of wine. I was like, holy shit, I just got this idea, and so I had to get up and stayed up all night making it, and seeing that people thought it was as funny as I thought it was, it's
yeah, it was, I think there are a lot of guys that I know that they thought PE bro. I think they were like with no arm, just like lumbering around. That was pretty spectacular. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
how'd you like Colin's voiceover of
It did make me want to watch Saving Private Ryan again. That was
I know, man. It's a classic.
You got to say that that virus was invented it was man invented. It wasn't natural. It was invented by this guy right over here. So,
all right, guys. Going on. This is awesome. We'll have to do it again sometime. So, thanks you guys, and thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate you guys.
Cheers.
Awesome, guys. See y'all. Bye.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Jake. Colin.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back. Chili's. I want my baby back ribs. I want my baby Chili's baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
I want my baby Chili's. I want my baby back ribs. I want my baby Chili's baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
I want my baby back.